How to get your baby to sleep. 1. Check and console, also known as the Ferber method, graduated extinction, progressive weighting, or the interval method. There are many variations on the check and console method, but the general principles are the same. You want to continue to check on your baby at preset intervals but never feed or rock them to sleep, as that would mean they aren't falling asleep on their own. After going through your bedtime routine, put your baby in their crib, leave the room and wait a specific amount of time, say, a minute. Then go in and reassure your baby with words like "Mommy loves you" or some kind of touch, such as a rub or pat. McGinn says it's preferable not to pick the baby up. Garden, on the other hand, reserves this method for babies 7 months and older. In her opinion, younger babies require a parental presence so they know they haven't been abandoned, especially if they've worked themselves up into a frenzy. Continue to leave and then check on them, increasing the amount of time between visits until you've reached about 10 or 15 minutes, and then just keep at it until they fall asleep. When they wake up, you start the check and console intervals all over again. This technique could take up to a week to work, but you should start seeing some progress after a few nights. Many experts recommend keeping a sleep training log to help reassure yourself. Some parents find that going into the room aggravates the baby even more and might consider a more direct method, like full extinction. Two, extinction, or cry it out. The idea behind extinction, or full extinction to differentiate it from graduated extinction, is that you want to extinguish the behavior, crying, by not responding to it. As with the check and console method, go through your bedtime routine, put them in their crib awake, say good night and walk out. This is certainly the most controversial sleep training method, and even experts disagree on what you should do next. It all depends on what stage your baby is at developmentally, as well as what works for the parents. McGinn, for example, suggests leaving your baby until the morning, unless you've predetermined that they still need a feed in the night. That first night can be rough, says McGinn. Ihe could be up every hour crying. Middleman, on the other hand, recommends that parents wait for at least 1 or 2 wake-ups before going back into the room. If the baby wakes up after midnight, she believes it's okay to go back and comfort your baby for a few minutes and then leave again. She also supports scheduling in regular nighttime feeds if your baby still needs them. Parents are often hesitant to go this route, worried about how much Irving will be involved. While McGinn doesn't deny it can be difficult at first, she finds parents are often surprised how quickly it works. Yes, there is a lot of crying, but it's short-term, she says. You might get a lot of crying for 2 to 3 nights, but then every night is less and less. She says you should see significant improvement with this method by night 3 or 4, but adds that it's important to try it for a week before determining that it's not working. Three-chair method. This is a very gradual sleep training method. McGinn gives her clients a 2-week plan for implementation, and requires a lot of discipline on the part of the parents. Again, you prep your baby for bed, but instead of leaving the room, you sit in a chair next to the crib. When they fall asleep, leave the room, but every time they wake up, sit back down in the chair until they fall back asleep. Every few nights, move the chair further and further away until you're out of the room. The pro of this method is that mom or dad is there and present, says McGinn. But the con is, there will likely still be some crying, and now baby is watching you watch them airy. It can be really hard to be consistent with this method. Middleman doesn't recommend this method to her clients because she says having a parent in the room but not responding to the baby is confusing and may also be too much stimulation, depending on the baby's age and developmental stage. They can get so escalated to the point that they can't calm themselves down, she says. 4. Pick up, put down, and shush pat for babies younger than 7 months. Garden prefers an approach where you stay in the room without giving them too much help to fall asleep. For example, you could stand over their crib and shush them, pat their tummy or apply pressure to calm and reassure them. Another option is to let them fuss for a bit. But when they start to escalate, pick them up to soothe them but put them back down before they fall asleep. Our job is to help calm the child, and their job is to fall asleep, says Garden. While these methods can work really well for younger babies, after 6 or 7 months, your presence might make your baby more upset, and picking them up and putting them back down will likely be too much stimulation. Five. Bedtime routine fading with the fading technique. Continue with whatever method you were using to help your baby fall asleep, such as rocking or nursing, but decrease the amount of time you spend doing it until, in theory, you don't have to do it at all. This is a great technique for minimizing crying, but unfortunately, many parents find it difficult to sustain. There has to be an end in sight, explains Middleman. For example, we'll meet this need for 5 to 7 days and then we'll pull back a little bit. But if you're willing to stick to the plan and get your baby to the end goal of going to bed without your assistance, Middleman says it's worth a try. Whichever way the child can get to sleep independently is fine, because that's the key ingredient to sleeping through the night. Six. Bedtime hour fading. Not to be confused with the bedtime routine fading technique described above. Bedtime hour fading involves putting your baby into the crib at the time they usually end up dozing off, and making that their new bedtime for a couple of nights, and then gradually moving it to an earlier time. For example, say you always put your baby down for the night at 7:30 p.m., but they tend to fuss or cry in the crib for 20 minutes or more, until they finally nod off around with. This means 7:50 to 8 p.m. is actually their natural bedtime, even though you'd like it to be earlier. To figure out when your baby naturally falls asleep, keep a diary for a few nights to track when they finally settle for the night. Using a video monitor can help with this. A few nights later, move the whole routine 15 minutes earlier. Continue moving the bedtime earlier by 15 minutes each night, if needed, until your baby has shifted their old habits to nod off at the desired time instead of the later one. While Meeson doesn't use this technique with her clients, she says the trick with any training routine is to be very consistent and commit to moving the bedtime earlier. It's easy to become inconsistent with this or SE up and then the child has a really late bedtime, says McGinch.